And now, from your local election headquarters, this is Big Country Politics on KTAB.
We need to make sure that the Railroad Commission's actions and decisions and all of the information that it's using to make its decisions, all that stuff needs to be fully transparent.
Good Sunday morning. Libertarian candidate Arthur Dibianca is running for Texas Railroad Commissioner this November. He tells us about some of the things he wants to accomplish if elected. Thank you for being here for Big Country Politics. I'm Adam Singleton.
We got to start reining in these data center companies. We got to stop them from jacking up those utility bills. We got to stop them from showing up in our communities without any input from residents. And we got to stop them from using all our water.
That is Democratic candidate James Talarico running for Texas Senate. A community roundtable was held here in Abilene Thursday evening discussing data centers here in the Big Country. Speaking with community members and local leaders, Abilene resident and small business owner Shannon Wilkins is a Republican who attended the roundtable. Wilkins saying he didn't come out to endorse Talarico, but believes that it is important to have both Democrats and Republicans in the room to have discussions on some topics. Wilkins says the conversation touched on more of the negatives of data centers.
The data centers have their positive sides, they have their negative sides. We kind of hit on the negative sides. It kind of ventured off the property of the data center to the traffic, the gravel trucks, the influx of people, what we're going to do when a data center leaves and we have all these extra people here.
Talarico faces Republican candidates Ken Paxton in the November election. KTAB did reach out to the Paxton campaign for an interview, but we have not heard back. And the key city is Abilene is starting to see more boost in revenue and surge from sales and property taxes tied to that data center construction. But that doesn't mean that everyone is seeing the same benefit. Some areas, including Abilene ISD, are not receiving additional funding through the growing tax base. Abilene ISD Superintendent Joe Waldron explained that the amount of money the district receives is determined by the state. If the local tax base contributes less than the allotted amount, the state pays the rest. If local tax base contributes more than the excess is sent to the state's general fund in a process called recapture.
The data center is fantastic for our community. There's going to be a lot of benefits to it. Being here economically, there's some good positive impacts, but for financially speaking for Abilene ISD, the data center equals no new revenue for us.
Looking at the last few years, 3 years ago, the local tax base was contributing 40% to the state, while the state was contributing 60%. That flipped last year, the local base paying the 60 and the state contributing 40. When we last spoke to Dr. Waldron in late July, he said that the best calculation at the time of the district would be in recapture. Waldron saying that this depends on how the year goes with factors such as attendance and enrollment. And a complex legal battle over a baby born in North Texas this week has some worried about the future of surrogacy in the state. The debate over surrogacy rights started with a California couple planning to have a baby through a surrogate from Alaska. The medical checkup at the 20th week of pregnancy revealed that the child would be born with a heart defect requiring surgery to save its life. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton alleges that when the intended parents decided to terminate the pregnancy, then the surrogate traveled to Texas to give birth and fight for custody. A judge in North Texas issued an order earlier this week requiring the child remain in Texas and receive medical care until a hearing later this month. The story has gained national attention, and when Texas Republicans considered legislation over commercial surrogacy, Texas reporter Dylan McKim explains why some Texans are worried about their embryos and their chances for surrogacy.
This was one of my first surrogacies.
At the Chaw Law Group in Austin, family law attorney Christine Henry Andreessen displays some of her successes.
This is a surrogacy baby.
She helps clients with adoptions, IVF, and surrogacy. But in the midst of a legal standoff over a surrogate baby in Texas, Andreessen said her clients have been calling.
Are these clients that are worried about anything?
I have clients who are wanting to do surrogacy in Texas in the future and wondering if it's going to be made illegal based on this case.
We need to send a strong and clear message to Austin.
At the Texas State Republican Convention this summer, a majority of delegates made it clear they want lawmakers to ban IVF and commercial surrogacy. Texas lawmakers have said they will address commercial surrogacy in next year's legislative session.
We are going to look at the practice potentially of commercial surrogacy. And is that being monetized?
And Treason is worried future legislation will be influenced by cases like the one playing out in Texas currently, instead of the surrogacy success stories that are more common, like one Texas woman who told lawmakers she used a surrogate to grow her family.
Well, so we've had 3 children, 2 that I've had and 1 that we had via surrogacy, and it was the best experience that we've had.
In Austin, I'm Dylan McKim.
Thank you, Dylan. A hearing in the case for baby Gabriel in North Texas is scheduled for August 25th. Turning now to Washington, where President Trump is calling on the CDC to overhaul the childhood national vaccination schedule. He signed a new executive order calling for that change in medical guidance. The idea is already getting a lot of pushback. The executive order calls for spacing out of childhood vaccines, but public health experts are raising concerns that it could lead to increased risk for kids becoming infected with vaccine-presentable diseases before getting all their shots. News Nation Washington correspondent Gabrielle Caracciolo reports.
We think we're going to have a tremendous result.
President Trump's new executive order calls for new childhood vaccine recommendations. It suggests separating the combined measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine into 3 separate appointments. Other vaccines would no longer be recommended for all children.
It's not only that you're doing fewer vaccines or jabs, as they say, but you're doing them in a series of visits to the doctor, much smaller amounts.
The president repeatedly suggesting the number or timing of vaccines could play a role in the rising rates of autism.
There's a reason for such epidemic rates of autism, and we're going to bring it back to much closer to where it was.
The announcement quickly sparking backlash.
I think this just makes it much harder and more confusing for parents. And I think that'll lead to fewer parents even getting their kids vaccinated at all.
Dr. Aziz Shah says there's no link between vaccines and autism.
A lot of us are concerned about what is causing autism, and we need more studies on that. One thing we know is that it's not vaccines. Could be other things, environmental factors. We should be studying those things and not getting distracted by the vaccine part.
Gabrielle Caracciolo, News Nation, Washington.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Lawmakers are also reacting to social media. Republican Senator and Dr. Bill Cassidy slammed the idea, writing, "I am a doctor. This executive order is wrong. The president does not have the expertise to make these changes," end quote. When we come back here on Big Country Politics, we hear from the Libertarian candidate for Texas Railroad Commissioner. He talks about the need for transparency and other things he wants to accomplish if elected. We're back in 2 minutes.
Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Welcome back to Big Country Politics. For today's Sunday conversation, I'm joined by Arthur Dibianca, the Libertarian candidate for Texas Railroad Commissioner. Thank you for joining us.
I'm pleased to be here.
Yeah, can you start by just kind of introducing yourself a little bit, telling us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I'm Arthur Dibianca. I'm the Libertarian nominee for Railroad Commissioner this year. I was not born in Texas, but I've lived here since 1991. I'll mention that I do not have personal connections to the oil and gas industry, and I do not have family connections to the oil and gas industry either.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about your background, what you've been doing, kind of how it'll translate to the Railroad Commission?
Well, I'm a retired programmer. I think what I'm trying to bring to the table for the Railroad Commission is some, one thing is freedom from conflict of interest, but also some larger principles that I think the Railroad Commission needs to do a better job of not only promoting the oil and gas industry, but also making sure that it secures the rights of its constituents.
Okay, yeah. Can you kind of expand on that, why you decided to jump into this race?
So I think one of the issues that the Railroad Commission faces is regulatory capture. Commissioners can be in a position where if they feel that their job is to promote the oil and gas industry, they can make decisions that prioritize industry interests over the rights of, for example, the rights of surface rights holders, homeowners, anyone else. Also within the industry, there's a tendency to promote the interests of large and entrenched companies and protect them from competition. So I want to make sure that the Railroad Commission treats everything as a level playing field, does not pick winners and losers, and really make sure to give full priority to the rights of landowners, and to make sure that we remember that rights are more important than interests.
Okay, so kind of prioritizing the Texans.
Yeah, and both surface rights holders and mineral rights holders, and of course, oil and gas industry has rights as well, but we want to make sure that the rights of landowners is prioritized over just the interests of the industry.
Sure. Can you expand on kind of how you do that in a practical sense?
It's just case by case. I mean, as things come forward, we need to make sure. Well, I'll give you one example. When it comes to something that's in the news a lot for the when it comes to the Railroad Commission is basically environmental damage, earthquakes, wastewater lakes, things like that. We need a system where, on the one hand, we're not trying to constrain the oil and gas industry with prior constraint type regulations, where the commission's telling oil and gas companies, no, you just can't do this, no, you just can't do this, because of the potential that it might cause a problem down the line. However, we need to make sure that when industry actions cause damage, and that we've seen it happen, we need to make sure that restitution is readily available. So whether that's through requiring insurance or posting bond or having cleanup funds, oil and gas companies need to proactively provide restitution processes so that when damage occurs, you don't have a situation where homeowners have to do, very difficult and expensive lawsuits, or don't have to, and not just homeowners, but any property rights owners, and don't have to, well, mostly the restitution is readily available and they don't have to fight to get something. And also to make sure that the industry can't use existing regulations as a defense. So what happens sometimes is when the Railroad Commission gives proactive or prior constraint type regulations, if companies are sued, they can use that as a defense and say, well, we followed all the regulations that were put in front of us, so we don't have any liability for anything. But that's not how the system should work. We need to make sure that restitution is readily available.
Okay, yeah, and I want to circle back to some of your policy priorities, but first, can you kind of talk about how you approach this race, since you're a third-party candidate and it can be a bit of an uphill battle?
Sure. I mean, ultimately, this is always about the voters. It's not about the candidates. I want to make sure that voters have this option available, and I hope they take it. And of course, as in every election, the voters are going to make their choice, and they're going to, live with the consequences of that choice. But I want to make sure that we've got a candidate who takes the job seriously and sees the job for what it is not just a culture warrior, and brings the right principles to the position.
Sure. What does that road to November kind of look like for you as we enter those last few months?
We're going to see. We're going to see how things play out. I don't have a real specific set of plans right now, but we'll see where things take us.
Sure. Yeah. So you were kind of touching on this a little bit more. One of your priorities was promoting free market energy policy. It's kind of something you've touched on your website. Can you talk about what that would look like if you were elected?
Yeah, I think the general principle is that industry and oil and gas companies, as well as other energy companies, although of course the Railroad Commission is focused on oil and gas, should be able to take risks and basically do what they want to do and take risks, as long as they're prepared to deal with any damage or problems that they cause. It's all a question of making sure that everyone's rights are secure all of the time. So maybe an example of this is making sure that not just that property rights are given appropriate priority relative to the industry practices, but also to balance surface rights against mineral rights. One of the issues we've had in Texas for a long time, and to be fair, this is not just a Railroad Commission problem, a lot of this is a legislative issue as well, is that mineral rights holders have been prioritized over surface rights holders. And look, none of us live 10,000 feet underground. We all live on the surface. And we need to make sure that surface rights holders have their rights fully protected as well, and make sure that we don't always or have a tendency to give priority to mineral rights holders when there are conflicts.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we'll keep talking about your campaign for Railroad Commission.
Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Welcome back for today's Sunday Conversation. We are speaking with Arthur Dibianca, the Libertarian candidate for Texas Railroad Commission. So we were talking earlier about kind of that free market energy policy. Are you talking about having less regulation? Is that kind of what that looks like?
Well, it could be. It's more the type of regulation. I want to make sure, first of all, that the Railroad Commission does not give entrenched companies unfair advantages over newcomers. One of the things that can happen with what they call regulatory capture is that big industry players who develop relationships with commissioners get them to regulate in a way that gives them advantages over newcomers and generally protects them from competition. That's exactly what we don't want. We want to make sure that competition is always allowed to thrive. So that could mean less regulation, or it could just mean regulating properly to avoid that problem.
Okay, so you're kind of talking about more of an even playing field type of thing in that free market.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Okay. Another one of your priorities, and you were touching on this earlier as well, was that environmental responsibility, kind of through accountability. Can you talk about what that accountability would look like?
Well, like I was saying earlier, the important thing is to make sure that restitution is readily available. Mm. So there's different mechanisms to do that. You can require insurance. Basically, you can think of it as the cost you're paying for your liability protection. Whether you're insured against stuff, whether you post bond to deal with problems as they arise, or whether oil and gas companies proactively provide funds to pay for damage when it occurs, because it's not always predictable, of course. All those mechanisms are good for providing restitution. What we don't want is a situation where taxpayers are expected to foot the bill to clean up problems caused by industry action.
Okay. Yeah. Can you talk about kind of, if elected, what would be the first thing or your first steps that you would take?
Sure. Let me mention a couple of other things as well, because some of these might be a little bit more straightforward. I want to make sure that the Railroad Commission does a better job with transparency. We've obviously got the problem where even today, less than 10% of voters have any idea what the Railroad Commission does. Unfortunately, voters, I think, tend to vote by party label for railroad commissioner and not really understanding what the implications are. So a name change would help with that. Unfortunately, I think current interests want to avoid changing the name of the Railroad Commission because there are advantages to flying under the radar. But we need to make sure that the Railroad Commission's actions and decisions and all of the information that it's using to make its decisions, all that stuff needs to be fully transparent. Another thing has to do with basically house cleaning. The Railroad Commission's been making rules and regulations for over 100 years. It's this just giant mess of stuff has built up over that time. We should go through and clean house and simplify the set of regulations so that it's modern, deals with the issues we're dealing with now, and isn't just cluttering the books.
Okay, yeah. Can you talk about those first steps towards doing those types of things?
It's mostly just a question of, we've got a lot of skilled engineers and Railroad Commission staff who have a lot of experience with this stuff. And their job is to provide the information to the commissioners, and the commissioner's job is to look at that information and make the most judicious choices.
Yeah, sure. You talk about transparency and, people maybe not knowing what the Railroad Commission does, especially with that name kind of being not exactly online with what it is. Can you talk about how you kind of educate people and reach them on those things?
Well, other than changing the name of the commission, which probably would be the easiest way, I think this is just commissioners have the option of communicating when they have those opportunities in a way that makes that clear. So it's just a question of finding opportunities and being open and forthright about it whenever possible.
Okay, so that's something, if elected, you want to be more open about and transparent.
Absolutely, yeah. Transparency is something that the Railroad Commission has not done a great job of recently, or I should say over the years, and it's something I would hope to improve.
Okay, yeah.
Let me mention one other thing before I forget. The Railroad Commission also regulates pipelines, and I think, and this would require legislation, but I think that's not best that it works that way. I would support moving pipeline regulation to TxDOT, which has a lot more experience with right-of-way management, and I think also would suffer from less conflict of interest.
Okay, yeah. Well, do you have like a final pitch or message that you would want to get out to voters, especially here in Abilene and the Big Country?
Well, just that it's important for everyone to remember that rights are more important than interests, and we need to make sure that all of our government officials, including railroad commissioners, understand that their job is not to promote an industry. Their job is to secure the rights of their constituents.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ariba. Now, we previously interviewed Democratic candidate John Rosenthal, and we have reached out to Republican candidate Beau French for an interview, but his team has not yet gotten back to us. We hope to get him on in the coming weeks. When we come back here on Big Country Politics, this week's number is all about those signs most Texans will find familiar. We're back in 2 minutes. Welcome back. Here is this week's number. If you've ever wondered how many historical markers are scattered across Texas, the Texas Historical Commission says there are more than 16,000 official historical markers across the state in all 254 counties. The program dates back to 1962, and the markers cover everything from historic buildings and communities to important people and events. So next time you pass one on a Texas road, stop by, take a closer look. There's a piece of Texas history behind it. Well, that does it all for this week's edition of Big Country Politics. You can catch all of our Sunday conversations on our website, bigcountryhomepage.com, as well as on the KTAB Plus app on your smart TV. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week. Same time, same place.